But this is what we do here, and thank you for the suggestion, Vipers. This is called Access Problems and Explanatory Overkill by Silvia Jonas, and it is out in Philosophical Studies from 2016. And we read, we review. I'm not endorsing this. We're just seeing if it's any good, and then we give it a rating at the end. If anyone's still around in chat, then they get to rate. I appreciate you sticking around. Dojo says, I'm just using one example. Specificity helps us to think of the broader topic. Duels are not currently in the social structure ethically okay. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So that's a good point. Duels have been, in the past, socially acceptable. We no longer think duels where someone dies is okay. And, and so that would be a situation where, in the future, something we consider now to be bad or good could, in future societies, be otherwise. Yeah. So, Unreal says we've got it. Let's see what Unreal has got for us. Greetings from the future. Awesome, Sylvia. So yeah, that's fun. Let me do that. Okay. But yeah, as always, let me know what you think, and if you have any questions along the way, have at it. I'll try to answer as best you can, but it's my first time reading it too. Access problems. Let D be a domain of a priori truths. What the fuck? Talk about starting off a paper with just like, let's fuck with everyone's heads that's not an analytic philosophers. Okay, so we're just living in this world where there's a platonic heaven. We're going to call that the domain of a priori truths. Whatever they are, just things that are true by reason of definition. Okay. The access problem, also known as the reliability challenge for realism about D, consists in the apparent impossibility of explaining how knowledge of the D truths is possible if these truths are understood realistically, that is, objectively, response independently, robustly true. Okay, so how are all the things we think are true by definition, and just like a priori true, how exactly are they real? I hope she defines realism. We'll find out. Yep. Dead the Wraith, what's up? Formulated as a question, how could it be anything but a fluke? Did I click? I did click. How could it be anything that a fluke that our D beliefs reliably match the D truths? Okay, so that our understanding of the things that are true actually match up with the things that are true in the world. Because we can be wrong about stuff.
I salute you.
Yui, thank you for the follow. Dogger says, I think there are meta-ethical rules that might be universal, but I have a relativist tendency. Yeah, so like, again, good on you for recognizing that, because it does affect how you view your meta-ethics and your metaphysics in general. Yovko says, does it imply non-naturalism or only stance independence, mind independent? You know, these are going to depend on the particular system. Usually when you say something is real, that implies that it's part of nature, and then we can go just discover it. And then it would be stance independent, because it's like, it doesn't matter who we are, where we are, what we're doing. It's something out in the world we could go find out. So that would be mind independent, stance independent, but it would imply usually a kind of a form of naturalism to something out there. If it was metaphysical, then, or ethical, I would say a naturalistic ethics, where ethics is part of the world. D beliefs and D truths, something we have to all resolve eventually. Exactly. I mean, we all need these sorts of D things. So, like these D truths, we need the D. Failure to provide an explanation suitable to bridge this gap between the D truths and the subject holding D beliefs has been argued to undermine realist beliefs in the D truths. Domains supposedly affected by the access problem are. Yeah, so again, if there are truths out in the world just by truth by definition, how do we reliably know the truths by definition? We'd have to know something about this, meta realm to like know that it was true by definition in the right way. You'd have to know that the definitions you're using are true by definition in the right way. Okay. Mathematics. The access problem for the domain of mathematics is also known as the Benacerraf field challenge. Benacerraf points out that if numbers are the kinds of entities they are normally taken to be, namely mind-independent abstract objects, I think this is what Yovko was getting into, that like we've got things in the world that they're mind-independent abstract objects, then the connection between the truths condition for the statement of number theory and any relevant events connected with the people who are supposed to have mathematical knowledge cannot be made out. Yeah, so if the things about math are out in the world and we're making this stuff up in our mind, how do we connect the two? And Field clarifies, Ben-Asaraf's challenge is to provide an account of the mechanisms that explain how our beliefs about these remote entities can so well reflect the facts about them. The idea is that if it appears, in principle, impossible to explain this, then that tends to undermine the belief in mathematical entities, despite whatever reasons we might have for believing in them. Yeah, so how do we know what we say about math is actually the way the math is out in the real world? And I know Hartree Field, and if I'm ever overly nice about Hartree, it's because I do like the man. So I've met him a bunch in New York, and I actually sat in on one of his classes many, many years ago. So I mean, this is just full disclosure. I mean, I don't expect to be going like Hartree does not need any favors from me. I don't expect to be giving him any, but I know Hartree Field. I've known him for many years at this point. Like, not like we're good friends or nothing, but like, to be fair, I'm just saying. He is someone I know. So if I'm overly nice about Hartree, call me out. Dogio says, I have a close female friend who lives in a very restrictive Muslim culture. She's brilliant and wonderful and happy. She made me question a lot of assumptions about ethics that I had. Yeah. You can be happy anywhere. A lot of it depends on your situation. Some things are completely shitty. Depends on what you want in life. But, people have been alive in very different situations for many thousands of years. And so it's like people can get by. You can't make assumptions about just because certain things you don't like about the culture means that everyone is unhappy within it. And there's a lot of benefits to other cultures. And if you're not in them, you don't always know about the benefits. And that's one of the great things about the internet, reading, and like knowledge. You get to learn about how other cultures do things and they take care of their own, maybe in ways you didn't understand or like could imagine without getting actually involved with somebody or a story from that culture. Okay, logic, the access problem for the domain of logic, runs parallel to the one for mathematics. Let the logical propositions be the logical truths and logical falsehoods. We are reliable about logic in the following sense. The logical propositions that we believe upon reflection and discussion are by and large true, and the logical propositions that we disbelieve upon reflection and discussion are by and large false. This is a striking fact about us, one that stands in need of explanation, but is not at all clear how to explain it. I know how I would explain it. Schechter. Do I know who this Schechter is? I wonder who that is. But yeah. Okay, morality. The access problem for the domain of morality, values, normativity consists in the following. Very often when we accept a normative judgment J, it is indeed true that J. And very often when we do not accept a normative judgment J, or at least when we reject it, it is indeed false that J. So there is a correlation between what the realist takes to be normative truths and our normative judgments. What explains this correlation? Yeah, I have an idea what's going on in this paper. It's just like there's a certain sense of reality that like they're defining it that we don't have access to. And as we were saying earlier, and I'm sure why Viper suggests it is because this is what this involves, is like what is reality and how do we have access to this sort of thing. But yeah. Modality, the same holds for the domain of modality. If modal realism gives the right account of the content of what we know, then it could not possibly be known at all. Put differently, if modal realism were true, then it would not be possible to know of any of the facts about what is merely possible or have any reason to believe any modal claim about what is merely possible. Yeah, I mean, I don't expect anyone outside of like navel-gazing philosophers to know anything about this, but basically it's like you're saying, think up a way the world could be. If the way the world could be is actually real, how would we have access to the way the world could possibly be? You're just imagining shit. How do you know that what you're imagining lines up with the way the world actually could be? Arguments from evolution. Oh, okay, so this is where they're going. Interesting. All right. Yeah, so the access problem is saying if there's a world out there, then you've got the veil of, subjective reality. We can't actually connect up how the thing in the thing in itself, the thing out in the world, with our belief about it, because our belief about it is necessarily subjective, wrapped up in our little stupid minds. And how would we ever connect what we believe to the thing in the world? Because the thing in the world is, beyond Kant's like veil or whatever. It's a noumena and phenomena. This is just a very Kantian style argument. You can probably hear a little disdain in my voice at this point, but like this is what's going on here. Like there's a way the world is, and we don't have direct access to the way the world is. We just don't. Because, we make mistakes. If we didn't ever make mistakes, then we could say, hey, then we have direct access, but we do make mistakes. And so obviously we don't have direct access to the world. Very Kantian. All right. Arguments from evolution. Arguments from evolution play a curious double role in recent debates about access problems from a priori domains D. Anti-realists interpret the fact that belief in the truths of a domain D seem to be evolutionarily hardwired as giving rise to an access problem, which is then used as evidence against realism about D. Realists use the very same evidence to deflect access problems and thus to argue for realism about D. Yeah, that's fair. I know where this is going. But I mean, I know we've got some pragmatists in chat. You can see that this is, if you're a pragmatist, then, the way the world is the way we use it. In some sense, that's how it is. This doesn't exist if you're pragmatic. This whole, the logic is as the logic does. There is no question about, the logical truths. No. The logic is as we pragmatically use it. So you don't actually have this split in a pragmatic version of the world. Now, do you want to have pragmatic ethics? No, because people want to have it say, no, when I say something's morally wrong, it's wrong. Full stop, simplicator. But if you're pragmatic, this doesn't arise. So, part of the issue. Welcome in, Luminous Bloom and 11 friends. Thank you so much for the raid. How's the rest of your stream, Luminous? What was going on? How was the Heidegger on Kant? What was going on? So, shout out the Luminance. What's up, K-Pars? How you been? Hope you're having a good day. We're reading something about, it's called the access problem at the moment. If anyone doesn't know me, I'm a philosopher. I'm a philosophizer. I philosophize. Generally, I do stuff on, personally, I do stuff on philosophical logic, metaphysics, and theory of knowledge. And here on stream, we read and discuss random philosophy papers suggested quite often by chat, or sometimes found randomly as I'm browsing Phil papers. But yeah, how's stream, Luminance? What was going on? How did everything go? Lumen says it was great. Basically, it was Heidegger on Heidegger, his definition of metaphysics and science. Yeah, I was there for when you said that the more famous the philosopher, the less they're actually engaging with anyone else and just telling you what they think about the topic. And that is entirely true. Whoever said that was right, because, you get wrapped up in your own little philosophical world, and you definitely just tell people how you think about stuff, your interpretations of stuff, which is usually not how other people are doing it. But yeah. So, yeah, if anyone here does not know Luminance is also a philosophy streamer, PDF streamer like me, has a PDF, discusses stuff, talks about big ideas. Been doing a course on Kant's Critique of Pure Reason, and did some secondary literature today, Heidegger, as on Kant's Critique of Pure Reason. So yeah, your old professor Elijah Milgram. Yeah, how am I? I'm a little grumpy today. I won't lie and be like, everything's great. No, I'm just grumpy as fuck. But it's just been this week. It was nothing particularly bad happened. It's just been a grating week. But yeah. I'm okay. So yeah, but what we're arguing here in this paper is what happens when, you're saying, and you'll appreciate this is a very Kantian style argument, where it's how do you know, how do our beliefs match up with things in the real world? Because the things in the real world, we have no access to the things out in the real world. Our beliefs only we think they match up, but we don't actually know that they do. How could they? Lumen says, I would say sorry about the Kant. I would be over soon, but the truth is it's going to take months to make it through. Yeah, I'm not sorry about the Kant. I disagree with Kant. I don't think I like his philosophy, but that doesn't mean it's not high-end philosophy that a lot of people take very seriously. What's up, Koss? Has the grading been grating? I don't grade, thankfully. But I have been... There's a lot of details I got to work through, yeah. So, yeah, and... not all of them are pleasant. You have to get on. I have to help my mom out. She's recovering from surgery at the moment. There's other stuff that needs to get done, and I'm running out of time very quickly because a lot of stuff I need to get done has to be done by sometime in September. Sometimes a little earlier, sometimes a little later. But yeah, I'm running out of time, and I'm just trying to take it easy. But life doesn't let you take it easy. Anyway. Okay, so now I have a question. So we're talking about evolution now. Does evolution give us access to the truth? And usually the answer is no. The grading is degrading. Fair. Lumen says, I go back and forth between whether or not I like Kant or not, although I've been enjoying reading it quite a bit. Well, that's good. If you enjoy what you're doing, it doesn't really matter if you think he's right or wrong. Like, I think Jean-Jacques Rousseau, I disagree with almost every position Jean-Jacques Rousseau has. On the other hand, I think he is talking about incredibly important topics. So it's like, I don't actually hate reading Jean-Jacques because I'm like, damn, he's talking about something important. He's completely wrong about it, but like, you know, like, I'm not sorry to be reading about this topic. Yeah. Okay. So, evolution against realism, debunking arguments. Evolutionary debunking arguments, EDAs, are mounted against realism about the truths of a domain D. The structure of EDAs is roughly as follows. 1. Assumption based on scientific data. The selective pressures of evolution favor people who hold D beliefs along the lines of those we actually hold. Assumption 2. Evolutionary forces are indifferent to truth. 3. Access problem. It seems impossible to explain how evolutionarily determined beliefs could track mind-independent a priori truths. From 1 and 2, we would have held D beliefs even if the D truths had been entirely different. That is, even if our beliefs had been false. Yeah, so the idea is that evolution is keeping us alive, not necessarily tracking any deep truths in the world. It just has to keep us alive in the moment. That's all it does. 5 from 3 and 4. This undermines our reason to think that D beliefs correspond to mind-independent truths. And conclusion, realism about D, which are the a priori truths, is false. Yeah. So what we think the a priori truths are isn't necessarily true because evolution is only trying to keep us alive in the short term, and it doesn't give a fuck about the way the world is in itself in some sense. So EDAs can be mounted against all 4 domains, mathematics. If our ancestors believed that 1 plus 1 equals 2 had an advantage over our ancestors who believed that 1 plus 1 equals 0, the reason they did is that corresponding first order logical truths about surroundings obtained. In other words, ancestor P did not have an advantage over ancestor Q because its belief that 1 plus 1 equals 2 was true. Yeah, is that right? Okay. I've met Justin Clark Doan too. Speaking of people I know. Yeah, so again, it only happened in the surroundings. It doesn't mean that it's true. 1 plus 1 equals 2 is true in some grand mathematical reality. 1 plus 1 was only true in that situation in the past. It may not be true in like the grand scheme of the universe. Logic. We could easily tell some sort of story on which there were selection pressures for the acceptance of classical logic. But what we need is a story on which there is a selection pressure for acceptance of the correct logic, whichever one that happens to be, and it isn't so obvious that we can do that. So the Benacerraf problem for logic seems to remain, and that's also more Hartree Field. Okay, morality. The content of human evaluative judgments has been tremendously influenced by the forces of natural selection, such that our system of evaluative judgments is saturated with evolutionary influence. Coincidence between the realists' independent evaluative truths and the evaluative directions in which natural selection tended to push us would require a fluke of luck that's extremely unlikely in view of the huge universe of logically possible evaluative judgments and truth. Yep. Why would evolution line up with the true morality? There's plenty of proximal moralities that don't align with the truth that may have been useful in the past. I mean, just think of like Machiavelli, like just be a scumbag. Even though I think Machiavelli was not doing it to tell people to be a scumbag, but like you can imagine like that is a useful way to be if you are a psychopath. And some people are. Modality. Since our ancestors evolved in the actual world, there is no selective pressures to reward accuracy about all possible worlds, and there is no handicap to being right only about the actual world. The attribute of a certain factual connections seemingly evidential is a terrible sentence. The attribute of a certain factual connection seeming self-evidently evidential to us might have been selected for and favored because acting upon this factual connection, which does hold, in general enhances fitness. The philosopher's explanation of why something seems evident to us on its face is that it is an inescapable necessary truth, one whose falsity cannot be coherently conceived. The evolutionary account provides an alternative possible explanation for why a truth might appear self-evident. And evolution might also instill as evident something that is only approximate to the truth and hence not strictly true at all. Again, you might think that the world could possibly be one way. That might be a very evolutionarily good thing to believe because it keeps you alive, say, but it may not actually be real. So what was it? They had a study, I think maybe Vipers brought this up not too long ago. I don't remember. If it's somebody else, I apologize. But it's like if you put rats in a bucket and they'll eventually get tired, a bucket of water, they'll eventually get tired and drown. If you put rats in a bucket of water and then save them after a few minutes before they drown, okay. But if you put those same rats that you've put in a bucket of water again, they will struggle for a lot longer because they have the belief that they won't drown, that somebody will come rescue them. And so once they have the idea that a rescue is possible, then they will, hold on for longer in hopes of being rescued. This is an experimental setup. Those rats are going to drown. They don't know that though. But in some sense, the belief is somehow instilled within them by rescuing them once. They understand that this has become a possibility. You don't have to apologize. Dojo, I curse like a sailor here sometimes. You don't have to worry about cursing. Apologize for language. Hope fucks us. Yeah, it can. I mean, then again, crazier things have happened. People have persevered through very terrible situations. So the hope may actually be accurate or enough that that's why we have it in terms of this sort of evolutionary thing. Viper says, so what do you do for a living? How do you feel about rats? Yeah, I drown rats for a living apparently, or somebody does. But yeah, they were timing how long rats would go before giving up and drowning. Like that was an experiment someone did. So, I mean, for all I know, they got rescued. Like before they died, the rats they held on swimming for way longer if they had been previously rescued. Anyway. Yeah, and so a rat that had never been rescued would just like let itself sink a lot earlier. Anyway. Okay. Evolution for realism. Safety for free. You hate that? Yeah. There's a lot of really cruddy things out there. Even if you hate the experiment, the results of the experiment, the idea that someone even thought of this, like, there's a lot to hate. Dojo says drown rats, provide rats to vipers. Name checks out. I have no comment on that one. Okay, evolutionary arguments for realism are built on the same evidence as evolutionary arguments against realism, namely on the fact that beliefs in the truths of a domain D seem to be evolutionarily hardwired. Okay, that's like strange right there. How do we know what counts as hardwired? But like, yeah. For the case of normativity, Enoch suggests that perhaps somewhat ironically, because Street thinks evolutionary considerations serve to ground the epistemological challenge to realism, evolutionary considerations can help the realist cope with the challenge. Survival or whatever is good, so behaving in ways that promote it is pro tanto good, but one efficient way of pushing us in the direction of acting in those ways is by pushing us to believe that it is good to act in those ways. And in fact, as we have just seen, it is good so to act. So the normative beliefs this mechanism pushes us to have will tend to be true. Yeah, so this is kind of the pragmatist line that if we were over the course of evolution always wrong, we would eventually have died out. Eventually, like even if it was like true in like the short term, the idea that like our entire history of evolution is wrong in terms of truth seems weird to us because it has to, be consistent with like the laws of nature and things like that. Otherwise, it wouldn't consistently have kept us alive for the amount of time it has. For the case of logic, Schechter suggests that we are reliable in believing logical truths and disbelieving logical falsehoods because we have a reliable mechanism for deductive reasoning. The explanation of how we came to have a reliable deductive mechanism is an evolutionary one. Our ancestors were selected for possessing logical concepts. Possessing these concepts conferred an evolutionary advantage because it enabled our ancestors to represent important information about the world and because it aided them in assessing their own patterns of reasoning. This proposal provides a satisfying answer to the reliability challenge for logic. Again, same thing. If our logic really wasn't tracking anything in the world, we could not be using the same logic that everyone seems to have been using for all of recorded history. We can still read old stories and understand the reasoning in them because the logic is not that different. So it seems that, given the length of human evolution, we have no choice but to have at least tracked something in the world. So this is a pragmatist line that even though we could be wrong a lot of the times in the short term, over the very long term, it seems unlikely. Okay. The most fully developed evolutionary argument for realism about a priori domains has been provided by Clark Doane. Do I say that right, or is it Doane? I forget. Damn it. Oh well. Who attempts to deflect the access problem for all of the above-mentioned domains in one go. He argues that the challenge to explain the reliability of our D beliefs is best understood as a challenge to show that our beliefs in the truth of a domain D are modally secure, that is sensitive and safe. The argument he develops to this end runs like this. 1. Access problem. For any domain D whose truths are interpreted as realistically, an access problem undermines beliefs in the D truths to the extent that it gives us reason to doubt the safety or sensitivity of our D beliefs. Again, so if anyone came in and doesn't know what's going on, this is the whole problem. Do our beliefs about what we think is necessarily true match up what is necessarily true in the external world? 2. Sensitivity. For all domain D whose truths are necessarily true, if true at all, beliefs in the D truth is trivially sensitive. Safety. 3. For all domains D belief in which could not have easily been wrong, for example, by being evolutionarily determined, belief in the D truth is safe. Yeah, so the long history of evolution guarantees at least some of the truths in there. From 1, a domain D does not face an access problem if belief in the D truths is demonstrably sensitive of safe. 5, necessity, mathematical, moral, etc. truths are necessarily true, if true at all. 6, from 2 and 5, mathematical, moral, etc. beliefs are sensitive. 7, determinacy, mathematical, moral, etc. beliefs are evolutionarily determined. And 8, from 3 and 7, mathematical, moral, etc. beliefs are safe. And conclusion, realism about mathematics, morality, excuse me, etc. does not face an access problem that could undermine our respective mathematical, moral, etc. beliefs. Again, this is the pragmatist line, I think, going back to Peirce, saying we can't have been wrong about all of this all the time. We'd be dead by now if we were always, something would have changed in the world over the course of our existence, and that's as good as we're ever going to get for as far as truth goes. So, yeah. Okay, so 1 is an assumption about epistemic undermining, according to which the only way to undermine a belief, that is to cast doubt on a belief without rebutting it, is to threaten its credibility modally. Clark Doane refers to this principle as modal security. If information E undermines all our beliefs of a kind D, then it does so by giving us reason to doubt our D beliefs are both sensitive and safe. 2 follows from the fact that the first part of sensitivity conditional, S's belief that P is sensitive if and only if P were false, S would not believe P, is never actualized for the necessary truths on standard semantics. Joe says, today I learned pro tanto. Love those Latin phrases. Ceteris paribus used to be in every goddamn economic paper. Yeah, ceteris paribus is all over the place. So, pro tanto. Let me just go get the... I know it in context, but one of the things that happens to me when on stream is I lose definitions. So it's I know it, but I'm just always it's to the extent or for so much. It's to the extent that it exists in the way that it does. It's I always gotta go over stuff when I'm streaming. Ugh. It's weird. I have more sensitivity about people who are losing their mind when they're old because streamer brain is real, and I'm I know what it's going to be like to be old. You're I'm trying to get that word, I can't do it, and it's Yeah, I have streamer brain. I know what that is. So, ceteris paribus sine qua non. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Thank you, streamer brain. Okay. So, yeah, so again, we're talking about that over the course of the history of evolution of humanity, we would have noticed, at least at some points, if what we thought were necessarily true didn't line up with like the world at a certain point. So if it would seem to be glaringly obvious if something we thought had to be fucking true wasn't true at a certain point, we would have noticed at some point over the course of our history. So it's sensitive. And so that's kind of where it's going here. All right, so 3 is where evolutionary reasoning comes in. In a nutshell, evolutionary determination gives us safety. S's belief that P is safe if and only if in all nearby worlds where S believes P is not false. Okay, yeah, so this is a very complicated way of saying what I just said. If believing P is evolutionarily hardwired, then we have good reason to think that we would have believed in P in all nearby possible worlds. Since our beliefs are, by assumption, about necessary truths, we also know that our beliefs would not have been false in those worlds. Hence, if evolution presses us to believe that P, our belief in P is safe. Clark-Doan makes this argument explicitly for mathematical and moral beliefs, suggests that it also works for the domains of logic and modality. Yeah, so, again, we would have noticed if something we thought was absolutely true happened to be false. All right, so 5 is a commonly endorsed assumption. 7 is an assumption shared by realists and anti-realists, debunkers alike. This argument, let's call it DIS for domain-independent solution, thus works for all domains D fulfilling 2 conditions. What's up, good right hook? Except clearly this is not true. Persistent delusions based on ego and faulty memory and weak senses is a constant in humanities no matter what the culture. Fair. You can disagree with this argument. I'm not saying this is right. I'm just saying the author is just saying this is what people have argued to say that evolution does support that we get towards the truth. I am sure that the objection you bring up right there has been discussed. Like, this is not something they would be unaware of. I mean, we're not reading Justin Clark-Doan's paper here where he'd bring it up, but like this author is just recapping Justin's argument. So we'll see if it gets brought up, but I'm sure someone was just like, and in case you think of the very like obvious objection that people are delusional, like I'm sure that got brought up. So like, yes, you're correct. No, don't be sorry. Don't be sorry. Like, it's an important point, but it's like, yeah, like I just want to give them credit. Like, these people are not that insane. I actually know some of these people, so like they would have said it. Okay. So yeah, so we're going to talk about DIS for domain independent solution, thus works for all domains D fulfilling 2 conditions. A, the truths of D are necessarily true, if it's true at all, and B, some plausible story, evolutionary determination being the prime candidate, can be told why we hold D beliefs at all and why we could not have easily believed differently. So, yeah. Thus, if DIS is sound, then realist belief about a priori domains, such as mathematics, logic, morality, and modality, cannot be undermined by access problems. In fact, Clark-Doan argues DIS shows that there virtually is no access problem for any of the above domains, and thus that the argument offered here may suggest that we have knowledge in mathematics and the related areas. The author will now argue that there are 2 reasons why we should reject DIS, and therefore all other attempts to explain the reliability of our D beliefs in terms of an evolutionary story. So yeah, the author may be on your side, the good right hook, you know? We're going to see what the author says here. And so maybe they're going to bring up exactly what you said and say why Justin Clark-Doan is wrong about this. The first reason is that DIS effectively and counterintuitively eliminates the access problem for controversial belief systems such as theism. The second reason is that it makes the realist viciously immune to counter-arguments from explanatory dispensability and more generally to all counter-arguments that are not rebutting defeaters. Yeah, and so this is a very fancy way of saying that they're delusional. So it's not exactly what you said, but it's in the neighborhood. Okay, contentious domains. Recall that DIS works for all domains D that fulfill conditions A and B, so let's run it for a domain that fulfills both conditions, but that many would not consider on par with mathematics or reality. Theism, the domain of God truths, comes to mind. Okay, so what we're going to say is, hey, you believe in God X, I believe in God Y, we disagree, and how do we figure this out? I am starting to lose my mind. I can feel it. Ugh. It's like, I should have known what pro tanto was, and I can already realize, I'm like, why didn't I remember what pro tanto was? Like, I know what pro tanto means, or I did at some point. If God exists, she presumably exists necessarily. The truths of theism are necessary truths. Theism thus fulfills condition A. Fulfilling condition A entails that belief in the truth of theism is trivially sensitive. If we can tell a coherent story about the evolutionary benefits of theistic belief, then by the same reasoning applied in the mathematical and moral case, our theistic beliefs are safe. They could not have easily been different because we were bound to hold exactly the beliefs we actually hold due to the selective pressures of evolution. Luminance says, losing your mind or just losing access to your mind. I do stuff like that all the time on stream. Yeah. Yep. Streamer brain, it's very real. I mean, both you and me would deny the existence of mind, so this is just me complaining about my failures to actually be smart. It's not actually, there is no mind, so. Yeah. On the plausible assumption that the selective pressures would have been the same or at least very similar in all nearby possible worlds, as was assumed for mathematics and morals, it follows that we could not easily have held alternative beliefs. Theistic beliefs thus also fulfill condition B, which makes it safe. According to DIS, fulfilling conditions A and B is equal to not facing an access problem. Yeah, so again, many people have believed in religions for all of human history as far as we know, and we would have been able to tell if they didn't, and so therefore it just seems like it fulfills the same conditions as all the other stuff. Hence, theism does not face an access problem. In other words, theists do not face the epistemological challenge of having to explain their correlation between the God truths, if such there are, and their God beliefs. This is an astonishing result, says the author. It effectively exempts the theist from the obligation to explain how knowledge of God is possible, assuming that God exists. What's wrong with this argument? 3 possible objections come to mind. Unreal says that I deny the existence of mimes. I have heard no objection from them. Correct. That's technically true. I think the best kind of true. Yeah, so this is I mean, in terms of writing strategy, in terms of writing philosophy, this is a reductio ad absurdum. It's taking the argument that they don't like and showing it has an absurd conclusion when you're just switching out some of the content of the argument. Like, so not the form. You're saying we're going to keep the exact same logical form as the evolutionary realists want, but we're going to change out some of the content of the beliefs, and we show that some people have had very contentious beliefs, and we get the odious conclusion that those contentious beliefs are necessarily true. And it's like, well, we shouldn't get that. We should get the result that the contentious beliefs are contentious. But once that argument shows that the contentious beliefs are necessarily true, it shows there's something wrong with the argument. So yeah. Dogo misplaced your mind, frantically searching for it, getting more comfortable though with never finding it. Yeah. It's just be like me and Luminance, like just deny its existence that was ever there. Much better philosophy. And of course, I've got like the Pixies, Where Is My Mind, playing in the back of my head at the moment. Okay, so what's wrong with this issue? Why do we think that proving the necessary existence of God is a problem? 1. Disagreement. The first objection that comes to their mind, is that there actually are people who are not theists. Whatever the evolutionary benefits of theistic belief may be, the fact that not all people hold theistic beliefs shows that our theistic beliefs are not safe. They could easily have been different, given that they are different for some, namely for atheists. And if theistic belief is not safe, then it is not immune to access problems. This is just a different formulation of the epistemic problem of disagreement. My belief in truth T is undermined if an epistemic peer disagrees with me, that is if an epistemic peer believes that not T. Now you have it stuck in your mind too? Ha 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 ha. Earworm, that one. Lumen says the Pixies understood the truth in an obscure way. Don't give me your fucking Heideggerian bullshit. We only somewhat understand the truth in some like darkly whatever bullshit. No, No. They had it exactly right. Fuck that shit. That's what annoys me about the Kantian stuff. Oh, we have some abstraction. Oh, it's very abstract. We only have some abstraction from reality. Shut the fuck up, Kant. Like, don't even talk about that. Like, that's some fucking, like just non-existent bullshit abstraction that you just want to feel better about yourself. Sorry, this is like my rants against like the Kantian tradition. It's like you want to say, oh yeah, we've got like this like really abstract shit we're getting off the world. No, you got nothing. That's just making yourself feel better. Okay. Marketing is everything, says Dojo. Belief is impacted by great marketing. Yes, exploit the motivations of the population, fear, sex, comfort. 100%. Lumen says, well, because they didn't know what it was, where it was, but they didn't know there was no mind. Yeah, I mean, that's fine. It was lost. Brian, Swab so much new woman. Exactly. We need like a... goddamn dog's dead. But yeah, Doge, we need like the good Doge back. The cute fucking Shiba Inu that like had wisdom. We need that Doge, not the fucking shitty ass version we have now in like the US. Okay. Where were we? Besides me, because it was funny. I was like thinking about Kant earlier because I lurked Lumen stream for a minute and I had to go out and I was thinking about this. I was just like, why, like, what do these people think they're doing? What do they think they're doing? It's ridiculous. All right. Anyway, not Luminants, but like, Kantians. Sorry. Not sorry. All right. However, the problem of pure disagreement is not specific to theism. As has been pointed out by Clark Doan himself, there is also fundamental pure disagreement between moral agents, even between mathematicians. As Bell and Hellman write, quote, contrary to the popular misconception of mathematics as cut and dried body of universally agreed on truths and methods, as soon as one examines the foundations of mathematics, one encounters divergences of viewpoint and failures of communication that can easily remind one of religious schismatic controversy. Oh no, did Kant ruin Heidegger for you too now? No. I still like Heidegger's metaphysics better. I do not like Kant. Heidegger is at least Heidegger's at least a bit better. Doge says, don't conflate Doge the meme, Doge the coin, and Doge the department. Yeah, I know. I want Doge the meme back. I want that to be the only thing I think about when I think about Doge. That was much better than what we currently have. Okay. Author continues, this is not to say that disagreement is a negligible issue for realism. Rather is to say that disagreement is a problem all realists face, independently of the domain they are realists about. Moreover, it is not clear to what extent pure disagreement constitutes a threat to realism at all. Inferring from S believes A and M believes that not A, that there is no objective truth about A, and hence realism about matters concerning A is false, is clearly invalid. This is because factual disagreement can be explained in numerous ways that are compatible with realism. Cognitive shortcomings, distorting effects of self-interest, and so forth. Yeah, people are delusional. That's what was brought up earlier in chat by the good right hook. Left hook or right hook? See, now I'm losing my mind. The good right hook. Yeah. So, it's like people disagree, but like there can be good reasons for their disagreement. That doesn't mean the world wasn't one of the ways. You could have been knocked in the head and just like delusional. It happens. Someone might think that the variations in the distribution of opinion between, for example, mathematics on the one hand and theology on the other point to a significant difference between the cases. But again, it is not at all clear that this difference is best accounted for metaphysically, that is, by adopting realism for domains with and rejecting realisms for domain without widespread overall agreement. The difference might be due to effects that have nothing to do with the truth or falsity of realism. For example, effects of self-interest can explain the variations in the distribution of disagreement in domains as variegated as mathematics, metaethics, and theology. Yeah, this is part of, people delude themselves to thinking they know the truth. So like a lot of religious people say that my religion is the absolute religion and everyone else sucks. And you get zealots. That happens a lot. Not everyone sucks. Like really, the rest of us don't suck. So, but like that's what happens. So the question is this the right way to view the world in terms of realism, even though some people are delusional? There's questions here. So, okay, author continues. Regarding the argument, what these arguments show is that either the issue of disagreement does not distinguish the case of theism from moral or mathematical realism, or we need to hear an additional argument why disagreement in the case of theism is somehow worse than disagreement in the case of mathematics or morality. In the absence of such an argument, the theist can use this to show that theism does not face an access problem. So you could still get out of it, as the author says. It's like, maybe there is a, you need to show that, like, maybe disagreement doesn't matter because there's disagreement everywhere. Okay. Objection 2, determinacy and safety. A second objection one might raise against the claim that theistic belief is evolutionarily determined. Perhaps theistic belief is an accident of nature with no special evolutionary benefits. If so, then it could easily have been the case that people did not believe in theism, leaving theistic belief unsafe and theism vulnerable to access problems. Douglas says truth outside tautologies is as real as the mind. People die. People be dead. Not really, no one's ever come back from that as far as I know. It's like, and if you're going to accept evolution, then like life and death is a part of evolution. So, I mean, you don't need mind for that kind of, the existence of life and death. You just need evolution. So, you can make a middle ground right there, just on the topic of, like, evolutionary things. You don't need mind. Vexler's undead. This is undead erasure. Sorry. Jeez. I did not mean to do that. If I will, I apologize, and to all my undead homies out there, I am sorry. Lumen says, do you think there is an access problem? Well, as far as I'm concerned, this access problem is a giant Kantian fucking mess. So I don't like the formulation of this at the moment. Now, can we make mistakes about the way the world is? Like, do our beliefs match up with the world? That's hard to know. I don't actually care most of the time. So, like, there might be an access problem, but I don't think it's a problem. That's kind of my position. Like, the idea that it's a problem, I think it's a pseudo problem. I don't think this is actually a problem. The problem is pragmatic. What do we do about stuff? We get things wrong all the time. I don't think this is a problem. I think this is part of our existence. And the idea of describing this as something that needs to be solved is mistaken. This is not the real underlying important issues going on here. So I appreciate understanding like the shape of these arguments. Like, I think this is high-end philosophy. Like, this is better than the last paper we read, which was from like a top journal, which I thought was kind of pointless. This one I think is, even though it's not for me, I think this is well done. So thank you, Rexler. I appreciate that. If I ever say anything stupid or need to be called out, please do so. I apologize. I get things wrong all the time. So yeah, like, to all my undead homies, I'm sorry. So yeah, I think there's an access issue. I don't think it's a problem. But then again, there's a lot of issues out there that need to be properly understood. Lumen says the correspondence theory of truth plaguing us with pseudo problems. Yes, now we're getting somewhere. That was your longest recent no. Yeah. Well, because, Dojo, it points to a larger problem in philosophy, which is that there are interesting problems, but I don't think this is it. And it's worth saying that in full. Like, and this is like in general in philosophy. So, like, different factions think a lot of what other people work on are like we call pseudo problems. It's only a problem that like you think exists, but like we're already beyond that if you saw the world the way I saw it. So it's like is it a problem? No, but it's unfair to like legit philosophers to just give a flat no. Like, their position merits response. So yeah. Okay. Where were we? Okay, so if so, then it could easily be the case that people did not believe in theism, leaving theistic belief unsafe and theism vulnerable to access problems. Okay, so what we're talking about now is that theism is just not responsive to the way the world is. Like, you can always, have a protection. Like, no matter what you say about God, like, and anything disproves it, well, you can always say, well, God was hiding or something. Yeah. And, yeah, so like I said, yeah, Dojo, like, I don't want to poo-poo other people's philosophy and just be like, no, they're wrong. That's not fair to, like, good philosophers. Yeah. Okay. However, this objection, and like I said earlier, there's people I know being quoted in this article. If I'm going too easy on them, call me out. But like I said, I've met Justin Clark Doan. I regard Hartree Field as a good person. Like, I know him. He's nice. So we've got multiple people in this article that from New York, I've met and know. And so it's like, if I'm ever going too easy on them, let me know. But like, this may also be my bias. Rexler, God does love a good game of hide and seek. Yeah, I mean, this is getting closer to the withdrawal of nature and the hiding of being from Heidegger. But like, this is actually an interesting issue. It's like the way that, like, the more we study and scientificate over all things in our worlds and like technologize all the things, that whatever is mysterious out there kind of gets pushed farther and farther away. But that doesn't mean it disappears. It just means it's somehow always like our technology only ever reaches so far. We can only get our like tendrils out so far. So whatever's at the edge of that, which we are still learning, because that's the whole point. We can extend ourselves even farther into the world, learn more things in nature. But like, what else is out there? So it is kind of a cat and mouse game of hide and seek. Go find what the world is like. But like, yeah, that's the Heideggerian take on it. I'm not sure that's exactly how I would formulate it, but like, this is one of the better formulations out there. So this is why I like Heidegger. Like, the whole withdrawal thing, I think, is clever. Anyway, okay, so what were we saying? Yeah, so we're doing a little bit of withdrawal of safety here. So this is interesting, yeah. However, this objection clearly fails. And if I'm wrong on the Heidegger, call me out, Luminance. There's plenty of scientific evidence suggesting that religious beliefs is evolutionarily beneficial, for example, because it promotes group cohesion and cooperation, reduces stress related to fear and death, and so forth. See all those peoples. Indeed, the same evidence used by atheists to construct evolutionary debunking arguments. If anything, it is atheism that looks like an evolutionary accident. Hence, theistic belief is safe. Yeah, so it looks like there's many things that religion provides that are beneficial to human life. And so that would then fall in line with the evolutionary argument that evolution is trying to keep us alive and happy. Okay. Objection 3, necessity and sensitivity. A third objection might be against the assumption that the truths of theism, if true at all, would be necessarily true. Some God truths, such as Mary's action was sinful, are only contingently true, given that Mary could have acted differently. If so, then belief in such truths is not sensitive. Okay, so we're doing like a relative idea of what counts as like religiously true. Okay. Again, this objection is not specific to theism. It does not mark a relevant difference between theism and morality. Mary's actions was wrong is contingent. Yeah, so again, you could have cultural relativism on this, what we were talking about earlier. And perhaps not even between theism and mathematics. The total number of frogs in the world is prime is contingent. Additional argument would be needed to show that the threat of contingency hangs only over theism, but not over morality and mathematics. Moreover, contingent God truths are presumably grounded in necessary God truths, such as God prohibits sin. If so, and if sensitivity is transitive, then belief in contingent truths grounded in sensitive beliefs are themselves sensitive. But even if sensitivity is not transitive, this still renders the necessary God truths, such as God exists, sensitive. This alone might be reason enough for some to reject dis. Yeah, so again, if there's like questions about God, then it wouldn't have been holding over the course of evolution. So yeah. What's up, Adam? How you doing? Luminance says, sounds right to me. What withdraws are modes of being that are determined in different frames than this or that particular system of measurement, particularly in our world, the ones associated with mathematical science. Thank you. I mean, I do try to get we've discussed before, I do fancy myself a metaphysician, so I do try to get other metaphysicians' positions somewhat accurate. And I try to take Heidegger seriously. So, appreciate the feedback. Okay, so yeah, again, if we think what is theistically wrong as sensitive, but other things are like we think are sensitive too, so this may be enough to reject God, because the belief could also be contingent that God exists if somehow we connect that up with other thoughts. Whatever, maybe. Okay, but you could get away from that. So it's, alright, author continues. So it seems clear that Dis eliminates the access problem not only for mathematical and moral realism, but also for theism. For all those who would be unhappy to see mathematical realism and theism supported by the same argument, this is a problem. A brief passage indicates that Clark-Doan is aware of it. Quote, note that dispelling the access problem with Dis is not to say that our mathematical beliefs are in good epistemic standing, any more than it is to say that the theological beliefs of a theological realist who can argue both that the theological truths would be metaphysically necessary if true, and that she could not have easily had different theological beliefs are in good epistemic standing. For all that has been said, our mathematical and theological beliefs could be false and unjustified. Yeah, so Clark-Doan had an idea that, you could have these maybe questionable beliefs exist in the same mode as what you think of as mathematical beliefs. Okay, author says, in other words, even if Dis solves the access problem for theism, atheists can still argue that theistic belief is not justified. However, there are two problems with this response. The first one is that, just like the atheists, also mathematical and moral anti-realists can argue that beliefs in mathematical and moral realism, respectively, is not justified. The problem of justification does not mark a difference between mathematical and moral realism on the one hand and theism on the other. Yeah, so you can still doubt. I fucked up in a good way to be calm. Okay. Second, the problem of justification also doesn't mark a relevant difference between beliefs about maths, moral, or God on the one hand and the rest of our beliefs on the other. Put differently, there is no general theory of epistemic justification on which such beliefs constitute an epistemically problematic class of beliefs. Yeah, this makes sense. How do you actually have a boundary? This is a boundary problem. What's it called? Between religious beliefs, theistic beliefs, and say mathematical ones. If there's any overlap, you can't separate out. Just like the theistic beliefs that some people will say, don't count, and then mathematical ones that you think are necessarily true. How would you do that? You'd have to know a priori which ones are which is the question at hand to begin with. Okay, as Enoch points out for normative beliefs, quote, whether you are a coherentist or a foundationalist, or perhaps hoping for some middle ground between them, whether you are an internalist or an externalist about epistemic justification, or perhaps some hoping for some middle ground between them, whether or not you think that epistemic justification is conceptually tied to epistemic responsibility, whether or not you like working with a conception of epistemic virtue, whatever your theory of epistemic justification, it is hard to see any special difficulties applying it to normative beliefs. Yeah. So how do you actually separate out certain beliefs from other ones when our epistemology is the way it is? Okay, the same holds for mathematical and theistic beliefs. If we are coherentists about justification, then surely there's a way to render mathematical, moral, and theistic beliefs consistent with the rest of our beliefs. If we are foundationalists requiring defeasible justificatory status for whatever we take to be the foundations, then surely there's a way to find foundations for our mathematical, moral, and theistic beliefs. Yeah, and what I was saying earlier is that if you are willing to bite the bullet on different theories, you can always come up with a justification. You can always come up with something that you say, well, in this case, it's okay, even if there's contradictions. People are able to do that. So just because you think there's gotcha problems, well, there's gotcha responses too. Okay. Yeah, so that's at Luminance. Okay, in short, the issue of epistemic justification is not sufficient to mark the intuitive difference between belief in theism on the one hand and mathematical and moral beliefs on the other. But if this is the case, then it is not explaining justification, but explaining how we have epistemic access to alleged mathematical, moral, theistic truths that is the real challenge after all. As Enoch puts it, if a realist can cope with the access problem, it is not clear that she needs to worry about other challenges. Yeah, if you don't give a shit that like how your beliefs match up with the world, you're golden. It just doesn't matter. And this challenge is solved by dis, for mathematical realism, moral realism, and theism alike, and potentially for a whole range of other contentious but evolutionary continuous belief systems whose truths, if truth at all, are true at all, could be argued to be necessarily true. For example, misogynism, the domains of truth about the inferiority of women; patriarchism, the domain of truths about the best way to organize society; anthropocentrism, the domain of truths about the superiority of humans, and so forth. I like this author. Like, they're not heavy-handing. Like, they just were like, okay, maybe even if you do this, but look at every shitty idea humans have ever had, and you could make a similar argument for that. So it's like, if you are willing to accept this theory, you can do it, but think about the company you're inviting at that point. It's like, you can do this. And I like this author for admitting that you can make up arguments and save your old shitty ass theories if you want to. But is this really what you want to be doing? So they straight up admit that like you can save your shitty ass arguments in this way. The question is, this is the bad bedfellows. Is this putting you in league with all the shitty people in history? And is that really where you want to be? And this is vicious immunity. So this is the firebend. I was talking about this not too long ago. This was in Philosophy of Science, saying you can always stick with your old theory if you're willing to make more and more ad hoc exceptions. And that's how these things go. Vicious immunity. So you can always give yourself immunity from any counterexamples if you're willing to make ad hoc assumptions that like that counterexample was a special case. A second problem with this is that it renders realism about any of the above domains viciously immune to all possible counter-arguments. They're not rebutting defeaters. Okay, talks amongst yourselves. Most importantly, it renders the realist immune to arguments from dispensability, possibly the best arguments against realism currently out there. Excuse me. For all a priori domains D, if it turns out that the existence of objective-minded independent D truths plays no indispensable explanatory role in our best theories of why people hold D beliefs, then, so the anti-realists argue, this undermines realism about D. In other words, if D truths are dispensable to our best explanation of why people hold D beliefs, this should count as evidence against realism about D. Yeah, so if you don't need these ideas, get rid of them, then why do we think they're indispensable or necessarily true? Okay, now if dis holds, that's the evolutionary thing, the realist about D is totally immune to such arguments. Yeah. This is because her realist beliefs can only be undermined if their sensitivity or safety is threatened. As we saw above, belief in necessary truth is always trivially sensitive, so no matter how brilliant an argument the anti-realist comes up with, it will never be enough to threaten the sensitivity of the realist's beliefs. The same goes for safety. Being able to tell a coherent story about D beliefs, being evolutionarily determined, guarantees the safety of D beliefs, so no possible counter-argument will ever be enough to threaten the safety of the realist's beliefs. Yeah. So if you think it's true, you can just stick to your guns and be like, well, we wouldn't have ended up this way if it wasn't for the truth of this thing. To get a better feel for what this kind of immunity to counter-argument comes down to, imagine a classic belief-undermining scenario involving hallucinogenic drugs. And the good right hook, here's where we're getting into delusions. Lucy, who became devout theist 3 years ago, learns that she has been fed hallucinogenic drugs for the past 3 years. Knowing that her process of belief formation have been influenced in this way is likely to undermine her confidence in the beliefs she formed during that time, even though not a single one of her beliefs has been rebutted. For example, while Lucy formerly believed with great confidence that a purple hummingbird flew into her bedroom one day at dawn, she will now wonder whether this belief is indeed true, whether she had been hallucinating. A buddy of mine many years ago was telling me how he saw like what he thought was a Bigfoot in the woods. It had like glowing eyes, looked like an ape and stuff. And I was like, yeah, and what drugs were you on that night? He was like, acid. I'm like, okay. And he goes, you have a point there, Noah. I was like, yeah. Okay. Like, really? You thought you saw Bigfoot or whatever it was? It's Like, what drugs were you on? He was like, yeah, acid. So, or it was LSD. I forgot what he said. Like, yeah. Okay. Braced with the dis-style argument, Lucy's theistic beliefs, however, will be immune to the information that she has formed them under the influence of drugs. To see why, let the set of beliefs that Lucy holds be this. A. Necessarily God exists. B. Belief in God is evolutionary hardwired. C. I've been on these consciousness-altering drugs for the past 3 years. C. Has no influence on B. By assumption, the evolutionary facts are drug independent, that is, objective and verifiable. How dare I cost money? Yeah, well, that happens. Yeah, in Dojo, don't worry about getting Heidegger wrong. Basically, everyone gets Heidegger wrong. That's a different problem, though. Since the content of B provides the safety of A, C does nothing to threaten the safety of A. Yeah, so any counter argument is not going to counter the weight of history if you think the weight of history matters for the truth of your assumption. C also has no influence on A, first, and the being on drugs. First, C is not a rebutting defeater that would give Lucy a direct reason to believe not A. Second, the fact that Lucy came to believe A in a non-justification conferring way, namely under the influence of drugs, does nothing to threaten the sensitivity of A because, by assumption, A is about a necessary truth. As Lewis puts it, if what I believe is a necessary truth, then there is no possibility of being wrong. This is so whatever the subject matter and no matter how it came to be believed. Since Lucy knows this, her belief in God will not be shaken even if she learns that she was on drugs. This, if true, renders her theistic beliefs non-underminable. This kind of immunity against possible counter-arguments is vicious because it renders intuitively highly relevant arguments and information entirely irrelevant for realism, anti-realism discussions. Of course, Luminance, of course. Your dissertation is going to change the direction of all of philosophy. I apologize for even saying that. Oh. Okay. I know you put out an immediately just kidding lol, but like, yeah, we're all just doing our little fucking thing and hoping it, like, you know, pays off at some point. Okay, thus, if this is true, we seem to be facing a stalemate. We have no idea how, if not modally, realist belief about maths, morals, or God could be undermined, if neither by evolutionary arguments nor by arguments from dispensability. Paradoxically, however, it is precisely these arguments that are widely thought to constitute the biggest challenge for such beliefs. Conclusion. Converting evolutionary data into evidence for realism about a priori domains resembles a naturalistic fallacy. An inference is drawn from what is and has been believed most of the time to what is modally secure and therefore non-underminable. As a result, realists can use evolutionary arguments not only to support realism about controversial claims, but also to shield themselves against virtually all possible counter-arguments. This is a clear case of explanatory overkill, resulting in an argumentative stalemate. If we want to break it, we either need to find a non-modal way of undermining realist belief, or a modal way of undermining realist belief that does not amount to threatening safety or sensitivity. Until that is achieved, theists, as well as moral, modal, and mathematical realists, are in an unreasonably comfortable epistemic position. QED. Twitch philosophy is the new Vienna circle. I mean, you're not wrong. Heidegger had trouble with Heidegger. Thank you, Luminance. Yes. Peachtree Lingo. Holden was pretty unknown until like a century later. It could be. I don't know the history. Koss says, don't include me in your cult. My plan is to put up a tent near an Amish community and hope they don't let me die. That's nice. Oh, anyway, that was it for this article. What we do now is we rate and review it. If you were here, even if you weren't here, I have no way of stopping you or knowing what was going on. I don't look at the lurk list. But if this argument was fun and you thought it gave you some fun ideas, give it a brain dance. If you thought it talked about existential or artistic drama, give it a Nog stream. Nog Oro for Ouroboros, deep range on ideas. Nog Knife for slicing and dicing arguments. Nog Navel gazing only for academics. Nog Turd for if it was all style, no substance, no poop underneath. And Nog Grapes for big claims that shrivel up. You can also use the global vote yay and vote nay from Twitch, or my vote meh. Note, I do calculate an overall score for all of these your reviews, so anything in the green makes the overall score go up, anything in the red makes it go down, and the meh actually moves everything into the middle. And you can, spam some emotes. If you reuse it, it raises the count for that. K-Parts gives it a knife. Thank you. Cost, give it a meh. Thank you, Cos. Thank you, K-Pars. Adam says, on mathematical objects, how could you separate the usefulness or explanation to how well math maps to the universe? Even if you accept that you don't ontologically know what are numbers or the foundations of mathematics, a modern scientist is fused with math and its physical issues come along. Penelope Maddie, UCI professor of logic and mathematics, since we humans can epistemically grasp mathematical sets. Yeah, Luminous gave it a knife too. So I actually fucking hate the what people call the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics. I think that is this is my personal stance. I don't want to like shit on anyone else, but like most math is completely irrelevant for anything. Most of the time, it does not map onto the world. We're usually wrong about stuff. Only in very narrow instances does the math map onto the world, and that is in very controlled environments, technology, science, and we've had to work unbelievably hard to make that work. So the idea that it maps to the universe is actually, in my opinion, a very, very narrow domain of our experience, of what we know, of like the universe itself. And like, yeah, we've gotten really good with the science compared to the past. We've gotten really good with the technology compared to the past, but I don't actually see that as very much of mathematics or the universe. So I think we don't actually know a whole lot, but what we do know, we're getting better at it. And yeah, that stuff is effective, but only in its limited domain. That's my personal opinion. It's hard to actually know what counts as good or bad, but that's the point. I don't think people who think it's very good know what they're talking about either. And so the idea that like the effectiveness of mathematics can be used, it's like, no, you're just recency bias, looking at like things that worked recent and being like, oh, it's so good all the time. It's like, no, it ain't. No, it ain't. Lumens gave it a yay. Thank you. Adam came in late to remark may not apply this. Well, it is relevant, Adam. So that's fine. Unreal says nay and a navel gazing. Kept zoning out despite myself. I am or should be interested in the topic. We can't think of these things in these terms. Imagine it hits with the audience it aims for. Yeah, again, I don't actually give like this is not and is not aimed at me. This is sort of aimed at other people, but like this is in my area, so I actually kind of appreciate the argument. It's like I don't agree with its premise, but like in some sense, like I said, I know Hartree Field, I know Justin Clark Doan, I know some of the big players in this area, and so or in this paper, and so it's like I'm associated with a lot of like this sort of stuff. Yeah. Peach T. Lingo said, in a sense, we map mathematics onto observations, so it is reasonable from that point of view. Yeah. Yeah. And that's not, I mean, for the most part, you can say we do map them. How exactly that happens is a question, but like, yeah, we do associate the math with certain things in the world. So yeah. Peach T says, Cal comes after pondering gravity, not the other way. Yeah. Lumen says, I can only zone in on the Wednesday papers. I'm always post-stream zonked on Sunday. Fair. Yeah. Yep. Dojo says, math framework issue. Let's look at all the problems with solutions that exist and are unique, limits us to the most useless problems. This is what I'm talking about. People are looking at the ones that they are like, oh, look how amazing it was. It's like, yeah, that math maps onto that shit. We don't have that many of those things. There's a lot of math out there. It doesn't map onto that much. Yeah. Yeah, data fitting. Exactly, chocolate. So, but like that's the issue is like that's actually the entire issue in this paper, in my opinion. They're fitting whatever their ideas are, they're fitting the history to that, or the ideas to the history. And you can always do this. This is, as they said, it's a naturalistic fallacy, but it's a very specific kind of naturalistic fallacy. It's an epistemic evolutionary naturalistic fallacy. And the fact that they're doing this means that they get to do it willy-nilly if we accept this as a good argument in general. And these people seem to do it, but like as the author pointed out, very sort of not like it was a little bit heavy-handed, but they didn't like drive the point home, but they made their point. They said, look at all the strange bedfellows you're going to make if you actually accept this kind of argumentation, because anyone with any shitty idea can use the same argument that you're making here for what you consider to be a good use for it. Stats make you feel weird, yeah. Douglas says, I hate modern statistics. I worked on PhD in math but never completed it. Yep. Adam says, I like how math uses probability to describe quantum states. There's so many theories of quantum physics tied to collapse of the wave function, a mathematical theory. Yeah, we have not got this. Well, we've not solved physics, so there's more to be done. So what am I going to say about this? Yeah, this was very knock-knifey, I think. They were really providing arguments against a technical theory. Granted, I kind of like they're gonna get a Nog Naval too, because I don't think anyone else really cares. But I like this paper. I mean, it's in my area. It's how does argumentation affect what we believe? I like this sort of style. Granted, I don't like what they're attacking here, but that's okay. I agree with their overall position. So in some senses, like, I'm gonna give them a vote yay, just because I like, this is sort of like, yeah, it's navel gazy and it's kind of analytic-y, but like, this is my kind of shit. Even though I disagree with the premise, it's like, well, yeah, these people deserve to be told they're wrong for using this, for using as they were saying, the explanatory overkill, as they call it. I just say they're abusing the rhetorical practice of using evolutionary epistemology. That's not how to use evolutionary epistemology. That's an abuse of like a theory there. So it's like, yeah. So I think this was a like, this is like, I like the argument. So here, Douglas says, I also like the music of your friends' bands. Exactly. I mean, I said this at the get-go. Like, I know some of the people in this paper. As Viper says, this is a good-looking author. The author is very good-looking. This all counts. No, I was not thinking about the looks of the author. But, yep. Well, if anyone else wants to get their arguments in or their reviews in, now's the time. Lumen says, music is never as good when it's really good and your friends made it. There you go. Yeah. But like, yeah, so like this is a paper about argumentation being used illegitimately in a discussion. Like, that's what I'm doing here. We're analyzing arguments and what they're worth. So it's like, this is in my sort of like wheelhouse. Adam says, give me a brain. All right. Brain dance. Thank you, Adam. Tuned in. Appreciate it.